how working for Google, Amazon, Microsoft is basically losing the dream status.
Remember the golden age of working for the tech industry?
Fortune is unveiling its top 100 best companies to work for.
Google's #1 again this year. It was #1 last year and the year before. And Google has everything: free food everywhere, a Wi-Fi enabled free shuttle. They have horseshoe pits, volleyball courts, street hockey.
So how are they losing their status?
Pools.
Netflix is letting new parents take as much time off as they need during the first year of their child's birth or adoption.
Salesforce has mindfulness areas designed with help from monks. Airbnb gives employees a $2,000 travel stipend. Music discovery platform Pandora even pays for its workers to have gender affirmation surgery.
Let's pause here.
What?
It's not only big names like Google, Apple, and Amazon that enticed workers with these perks. Smaller tech startups were also offering workers outlandish extras. Everything from performance-based prizes to an endless supply of company-branded swag.
Top performers every month for the New York office get an actual custom oil canvas painting.
So if you pop it, actually reveals a secret room.
What?
We have like meetings in here, do poker, and maybe even close the deal, have a shot of whiskey or something.
Here's a must-come spot for anybody who comes to New Relic. It's where we have all our swag, all our New Relic pride. And the great thing is you can just come and grab whatever you want.
Well, that was the 2010s. This is how tech companies are grabbing
That
headlines
looks
these
so
days.
good.
The layoffs in technology just keep coming. The latest, Google cutting hundreds of jobs in its engineering, product, and hardware divisions.
So this is the latest round of layoffs we are hearing about in tech today. It's two fintech companies, Block and PayPal.
Microsoft cutting almost 2,000 jobs at Activision
Wow.
Blizzard and Xbox as the tech landscape resets.
Layoffs in the tech industry surged in 2023, sparked by high interest rates and a pivot to generative AI. The pace of layoffs in the tech industry has persisted well into 2024. Workers who were laid off now see this industry in a different way.
When you work for a big tech company, you had this assurance that you were going to be okay, that you were part of this greater thing, that you were part of
Never
this
assume
culture
you're
that
okay at a
really
job.
meant something, that you were making a difference. And at any moment, snap, you could be axed.
You should always work as if that next day you go into work, you are about to be laid off, I think. I think that's how we need to think nowadays. Right? You go into the job, you do your thing, but by end of day, you got to go, okay, I might be laid off tomorrow. Right? So you start looking a little bit. Every night, maybe take 5-10 minutes, just look around a little bit.
Before 2020, people were interested in the tech industry just because, the high pay, prestige. I think just seeing it as different, right? You have all these traditional companies, and then you have all these companies that are just doing things different. And they look like kind of the future of work. People thought it was going to be like a huge shift towards these fun environments and flexible environments.
And was it?
Places where they put employees first. Now that's sort of shifted, and you think, well, these aren't too much different than these older traditional companies that people were already working at in the early 2000s.
The tech industry as a whole has completely lost its luster because people are starting to recognize that the tech industry is just like any other industry. It was
Now
up
it
one day
is.
and now it's down. When you consider what's going on at companies like Google, we consider what's going on at companies like Amazon. The moment they started to announce layoffs, people started to recognize that these companies, these tech giants, are just like every other company. They're hire you today and they get rid of you tomorrow.
Exactly what it said, right? You just start looking for jobs, 5-10 minutes, you just spend some time doing that.
The tech industry completely dominated the news headlines in the 2010s. After the 2008 financial crisis, the U.S. Federal Reserve brought interest rates to near zero and kept them there for years. That allowed tech companies and startups to borrow money at rock-bottom prices and opened the floodgates for venture capital money too. Boosted by ultra-low interest rates and a ready supply of venture capital money, and skyrocketing adoption of smartphones and social media, tech companies took over the stock market as well. Working at one of these tech companies became a way to get rich. Employees often got a good portion of their compensation paid out in stock options. As tech stocks rose, workers got richer and richer. The tech-heavy NASDAQ, for example, rose about 347% from January 2010 to December 2019. Netflix was the biggest gainer among the FANG stocks, surging more than 4,000%.
Oh my God.
I think for a long time, working for a major tech company like Google or Meta, Microsoft, was really seen as a badge of honor because these were companies that were growing tremendously. And through most of the lifetime, for many of our current students right now and our recent graduates, all they saw their entire childhood was growth. They saw these companies get larger. They saw them innovate. They saw new products that really transformed their day-to-day life. So to be able to work in those companies was seen as prestigious, and it was seen as a very positive step in building their own careers to be able to contribute to the technology that they themselves and their families used every single day.
People definitely look at you differently when you have Microsoft or a larger tech company on your resume. People have called it the easy door into your next job or whatever. I don't know if it's that far, but definitely especially if you're going to a place that is built on Azure and you have Microsoft experience, that seems like a no-brainer. Or if you have going to somewhere that's a Google-based company and you have Google on your resume or Amazon, I think it probably puts you towards the front of the line.
It should, but sometimes it doesn't.
When COVID-19 began, the economy initially struggled, but the tech industry thrived. The Federal Reserve's swift actions, such as cutting interest rates back to near zero, boosted tech stocks. This in turn led to an increase in tech jobs, primarily as people stayed home. However, tech stocks took a hit once the Fed started raising rates in 2022, so the industry started using mass layoffs as one of the many ways of belt tightening. Wall Street loved this move, reflected in the bounce in tech stocks in 2023. The tech-heavy NASDAQ climbed 43%.
Is that the reason why they're telling people who are working remotely, a good majority, to come back in office to start working again?
In 2023,
in the office?
Its best year since 2020.
In the pandemic, the tech industry saw some pretty big pickups in job posting gains on the Indeed platform. We saw really strong hiring. People were at home. They were consuming more of kind of these tech goods and services. And many tech companies adjusted to that and hired more workers. So we saw a big run up in 2021-22. And then in 2023, we saw some of that demand start to kind of cool down and soften. In 2024, so far, we've seen somewhat similar to 2023, some layoffs being announced. We've seen kind of a continuation of pullback in job postings in the tech industry. But again, a lot of these layoffs that we've seen so far this year in 2024 have really been about right sizing and adjusting to a world of post-COVID consumer demand and trying to figure out what does the world look like after COVID. So a lot of it really comes down to businesses making moves to really understand, where their consumers are and trying to, fit their workforces to that demand.
Now we see the stock market reacted quite favorably to this round of layoffs. We see these record stock prices for a lot of these tech companies. The investors really favored profitability, really favored this lean year that these tech companies had. And so instead of rewarding the growth that we saw and them all pursue years ago, they're now rewarding profit. And so the layoffs have continued. People have become used to them. And regrettably and sadly, it seems that the layoffs is going to be the new normal.
I was just about to say the same thing. Does that mean layoffs are going to be the new normal, right? If you're working a job, right, for the tech company, and let's say overnight they fire. Perfect example is Twitter, right? How many people did Elon lay off or tell people to come back in, and they said, "Well, we like it how we're working," and he's like, "Okay, well, you're done," right? Like, is that the new norm?
Layoffs in tech show no signs of letting up. In fact, more and more companies have embraced, quote, efficiency as a common mantra in recent earnings calls.
A memo sent out by Elon Musk to the staff outlining that the company will be cutting more than 10% of its global staff.
The layoffs are the first for Apple since the pandemic and come shortly after the company shuttered its self-driving car project.
Amazon is cutting hundreds of jobs from its cloud computing division, Amazon Web Services.
Even though mass tech layoffs continue dominating headlines, the labor market still seems strong. The U.S. economy added 303,000 jobs in March, well above the Dow Jones estimate for a rise of 200,000, with the unemployment rate edging lower to 3.8%. The tech layoffs have prompted new workers to seek other opportunities, according to Handshake, a popular free job posting site for college students and graduates.
So the share of tech majors' job applications submitted to internet and software companies dropped by more than 30% between November 2021 and September of 2020.
Because the only jobs for COVID, right? You can only work from home, so you got basically 4 different ones, right? Internet and software, non-software tech, finance, management consulting. You could do those 4 from home easily. Everything else here kind of became difficult.
While the share of applications submitted to government jobs more than doubled. And part of the reason why this is happening is because stability is such a major factor in students' decision around what types of jobs they apply to and what types of jobs they accept. 77% of this recent class of 2024 cares about stability as the number one factor.
Because they want to make sure
and
that
the
their
government,
job is
for example,
good.
is an entity that provides a strong level of stability.
Because they want to make sure their job is good for them and it will last them at least, maybe 5-10 years before they get cut. Because what if they get hired for a job 6 months down the line? They're gone. So
Whereas they're looking at the headlines in the news and they're paying attention
Just
to all
another
of the
day,
layoffs that are happening in big tech. And that makes them feel unstable.
The layoff pandemic has not necessarily impacted tech the way we thought it was, largely because of the fact that these jobs still pay really well. And there's still a degree of luster. It's not nearly as exciting as it was 20 or 30 years ago, but it's still exciting. And people really want that bullet point of the resume, even if they only landed at Google for, let's say, 6 months or for a year, they can still say they worked there. I think what we're starting to see, though, ultimately, is that people are starting to consider other options. Whether they're deciding that once they get their degrees, they're going to go create their own businesses, they're going to get in government space, they're going to get in other industries where there is a need for their technical skill set, where they can essentially be a big fish in a small pond, which in many ways gives them job security that they don't necessarily give in the tech industry.
People that are wanting to work in tech and wanting to still stay in tech, I think we just have to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more guarded about keeping our options open and not feeling the need to be extremely loyal and dedicated to one company.
Which is why I was saying earlier, right? Like, treat every day when you go to work as if you're about to be laid off tomorrow. So that night, you go home, 5 to 10 minutes, you spend some time just looking. That's
because
the
they
only
surely
thing
are
you can
not
do,
dedicated
right? No harm, no
to
foul.
us, no matter what your manager, no matter what your director's saying, no matter what praise you're getting. It doesn't really matter sometimes at the end of the day.
True.
At a lot of tech companies, unfortunately.
These layoffs have, to an extent, hurt the luster of the tech industry, but not to the point that I think that people all of a sudden are going to decide not to go work for them anymore. I mean, even when you consider that recent college grads, 5 years ago, they couldn't wait to go to work for the big tech industry. But now they're considering things, whether I go to tech, whether I go to government, whether I go someplace else. I want to go someplace where I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself.
I think people are still doing that where they still have their options as to what they can do in their life, right? Whether it's doctor, engineering, physics, astrophysics. I think I said engineering, biochemical, anything like that. That's the stability of the job, which is what they said earlier. So that they're still keeping their options open, but trying to find out what's going to be stable for them in the long run.
Tech companies are just not offering that anymore because they're not necessarily disruptive. And I'm talking the big giants. I'm talking about the Amazons of the world, the Microsofts of the world, the Googles of the world. They're not seen as disruptors. Now they're seen as more established companies.
For the people who are chasing like a tech dream job, I think keep your options open and be realistic. Don't just focus on one company and feel like you have to get into that one company because it's the dream. Pay attention to the other ones. Pay attention to smaller companies. There's a lot of really good smaller companies that
Out
are,
there,
yep, not in the headlines, that are great
Good
places
point.
to work. Also, don't hold back. Drive towards something and have a goal. Just temper your expectations.
I think the glory days of the tech industry will certainly continue to flow back into the existence in the eyes of our early talent. I think it will look different as it continues to evolve. I think the values and the needs and the desires of our early talent will continue to change as the macroeconomic situation around them also changes. And I think big tech, if they want to remain an attractive option for early talent, will need to continue to evolve their workplace, their expectations, and their benefits.
Yeah, tech jobs right now is, you can do it, it's worth it, but you just have to be prepared. You might be laid off again. So, again, the biggest key takeaway here, yeah, layoffs keep happening despite a strong U.S. thing, right? Work every day as if the next day you're about to be laid off, which means that evening, 5 to 10 minutes, you just look for something, right? Look for something in your field or maybe outside of it. People might hire you, they might not. But people's expectations for hiring are also that's another story. But yeah, spend every day as if that day or next day you're going to get fired, and that evening you should be looking for something. That's my take.